Leah, thanks. 6:46 is the time. We're returning to our coverage of the Bourbon Street terror attack and the very latest in that ever-growing situation. Joining us now to talk more about the attack and before, we have Louisiana State Senator Royce Duplessis. Thanks for taking the time to be here this morning.
Thank you.
Before we jump into that, I do want to mention, a lot of people have been talking on social media and otherwise just in the community about tired of this agenda for people and New Orleans just being, resilient and we'll get through this. And there's this talk about already moving forward. But a lot of people I just think are tired. And you went to an event over the weekend. I want to kind of highlight that because you were in the community hearing from people. Is that sort of the same topic you're hearing there?
Absolutely. Look, even before this tragic event happened on New Year's Day, people were already tired of being resilient. Just all of the things that you have to deal with as a New Orleanian and all the challenges that we've been facing, people were just sort of overwhelmed with the idea of having to continuously be resilient. And then at the time of a new year where people are filled with optimism and hope and gratitude to wake up on New Year's Day to this tragic event, it's really a lot to ask of people to continue to be resilient. So I was grateful that Bishop Lester Love and Pastor Fran Love at the City of Love convened a call to prayer ceremony with other bishops and pastors, community leaders, the mayor, the sheriff, other elected officials, first responders, and they had a very impactful ceremony and vigil for the victims, the families, and first responders, city leaders, elected officials, business owners, everybody who's been impacted by this. New Orleanians have really experienced a wave of emotions over the past 5 days, from shock, disbelief, grief, sadness, anger, frustration, and we've really been all over the place in terms of our emotions. And now I think that prayer ceremony really helped us all call on that higher power to try to unify us as we don't understand why this happened, but we have to come together to work together to move forward.
Absolutely. And we talk about a lot of the frustration, as you mentioned just now. I think a part of that is surrounding a lot of attention that's been placed on the permanent bollards, which were not in place when this attack took place. And we've also heard from Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick, who said that she didn't know that temporary steel barriers, which the NOPD has in storage, were available to place at the intersection of Canal and Bourbon. So do you think somebody should be held responsible for not putting those barriers in place?
Here's what I'll say. During times like these, when there are so many questions and there's so much anger and frustration and hurt, we're always going to ask those questions as to who's to blame and who should be held accountable. 100% correct to ask those questions. I'm grateful for Superintendent Kirkpatrick for her honesty and transparency in telling the people straight up, look, I did not know that we had these in place. You listen to security experts from all over the world. Some say that had they been in place, it may have stopped it. Others say had they been in place, it would not have stopped it. I think what's important is that the questions be answered and there should be accountability, and the bollards or sidewalk stoppers, whatever they're called, they should have been in place. No question about it, especially if we had these resources in storage and we had invested in the resources, they should have been in place. But one thing we can't lose sight of is that we had an individual who had made up in his mind and in his heart that he was going to harm people, that he was going to take lives. So whether that was going to be on Bourbon Street, whether that was going to be on Canal Street, whether he was going to use a vehicle, or whether he was going to use an AR-15, this individual decided that he was going to hurt people. And for leadership, particularly first responders, law enforcement, they can do the absolute best to try to prevent someone from doing harm. But the reality is, when someone has made it up in their mind, it is very difficult to give absolute certainty to stop someone who's decided that they're willing to die themselves in order to kill other people. So I'm just grateful to the New Orleans Police Department, those two brave police officers who stopped this person from committing even more harm and who were shot themselves in the process, because we know that it could have been so much worse. But over the next several days, I know that there's going to be a lot of investigations. There have been hearings that are going to be scheduled, that have been scheduled, and our superintendent and others are going to have to answer certain questions. So right now, more information is coming out, and I just think that there should be absolute transparency and there should be accountability.
Agreed. You know, we only have a couple seconds left, but I do just want to ask a big question for a lot of people. We know that it's King's Day, carnival season is here. Do you feel that the city has what it needs in place to be safe for anyone visiting our city and for those living here moving forward with all the events we have coming up?
As I just said, we can be as safe as possible. There will be large crowd gatherings all throughout the city. So, you know, do you put bollards up on every single street where there's going to be a parade route? I mean, we're going to be as safe as we can possibly be. New Orleans is the place that brings many people together to gather and we have a good time, and we know how to do it. This was a tragic event. I think we're going to be as safe as we possibly can. We're going to have all kind of federal resources coming in, and I think the mayor has asked for an upgrade in terms of our status when it comes to that level of support. So I think we're going to be as safe as possible. Again, you cannot prevent someone who has decided that they want to cause harm. You can't stop it, but we can certainly try to minimize it. And I think we're going to be in as good of a position as possible.
Well, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.